Saturday night was supposed to be a celebration. Lena had just been promoted to department coordinator, something she'd been chasing for over a year, and her parents wanted to mark the occasion with a proper family dinner at their place in Boise. It had been a while since we'd all been together like that, and honestly, I was looking forward to it. The house smelled like roast chicken, garlic bread, and something sweet baking in the oven. Her mom's signature caramel pecan pie, no doubt. Bottles of wine were already open by the time we arrived. The energy was warm, relaxed. The kind of night where everyone has a little too much to drink and ends up telling stories that don't quite add up but no one calls out. Lena was glowing, beaming really. Her parents sat on either side of her like she was the guest of honor. Her brother, Colin, kept pouring her wine, and her cousin Jake was already halfway to slurring. He'd always been the loud one, worked in sales, knew too many jokes, none of them particularly funny unless you were already buzzed. We were all sitting around the table when Jake launched into one of his usual monologues about the joys of business travel. Best part about sales, he said, swirling his glass, is getting paid to fly first class, eat steak in 5-star restaurants, and stay in hotels where nobody knows your name. Lena chuckled. Don't forget the minibar, she added. That got a round of laughs. Jake leaned in, elbowing his sister. Right? Man, nothing beats those overnight stays. Comfy bed, complimentary breakfast, no one texting you about taking out the trash. Everyone laughed, especially Lena. Then she said it, just loud enough to cut through the noise. Yeah, sometimes you wake up in the wrong hotel. And not with the right person. There was a beat, a tiny pause where my brain just stopped. Then the room burst into laughter. Her dad shook his head, grinning. Her mom covered her mouth in mock horror. Jake whooped. Damn, Lena. Guess we know who the wild one is now. Everyone laughed again. Except me. I didn't laugh. I looked straight at her. She was already looking at me. Her smile didn't falter. Not even a flinch. She held my gaze like nothing she said was out of the ordinary. Like I was the only one in the room not getting the joke. Then she tilted her head, all casual and cool, and said, Tom, relax. You always take things so literally. Her mom jumped in, chuckling. It's just a joke, sweetie. You know Lena's sense of humor. But I wasn't laughing because I knew something no one else did. That last business trip Lena took, the one she said was a solo training in Portland, it had landed smack in the middle of our anniversary week. We'd argued about it. She swore it was mandatory. I had offered to come along, just for the weekend part, and she had shut it down fast. Said it was all workshops, no plus ones, that she'd barely have time to eat or sleep. I remember the night she left. I made us dinner anyway, like a fool. Set the table, lit candles. Texted her a picture and added, missing you tonight. She replied 3 hours later with, long day. I'll call tomorrow. She didn't. The next day she sent a picture of a coffee cup from some downtown cafe. No context, no caption. I replied, looks good. And she left me on read until the following morning. And now here she was, making jokes about waking up in the wrong hotel bed. If I'd heard it from someone else, I might have brushed it off. But the way she said it, the exactness of her words, how her voice didn't crack, how she stared directly at me, it didn't feel like a joke. Felt like a test. Like she wanted to see what I'd do. And what I did or didn't do probably told her everything she needed to know. I sat there, holding my glass, trying to keep my hand from shaking. My mouth was dry. Everyone had moved on to another topic, probably something about Lena's new title, but I wasn't listening. I could hear the clinking of silverware, forks tapping plates, wine being poured. Everything felt louder than it should have. Lena reached across the table to touch my arm, smiling like nothing had happened. Tom, you okay? You're really quiet tonight. I forced a smile, nodded, said something like, just tired. She leaned in a little, eyes warm, voice low enough that no one else could hear. You've got to stop being so sensitive. People will think you can't take a joke. There it was again, that little tilt in her voice, that subtle shift from playful to patronizing. And just like that, I felt small. Not because of what she said, but because I had ignored every red flag before this moment. I spent the rest of the dinner in a daze, pretending, laughing at jokes I didn't hear, chewing food I didn't taste, watching Lena light up the room, telling stories about office drama and promotion perks, and how her team surprised her with a catered lunch and flowers. She looked happy, confident, effortless, and I sat there thinking about that training in Portland. 3 nights. She had told me she was alone. She even FaceTimed me once, from what looked like a generic hotel room. But now I wondered, was she alone when she called me? Was someone else in the bathroom? Was someone else sleeping in that bed when the call ended? My stomach turned. After dinner, her mom brought out the dessert, the pie Lena always used to say reminded her of Sundays as a kid. She made a whole show of serving it, topping each slice with a scoop of vanilla ice cream. When Lena handed me mine, she smiled again. "You love this, don't you?" I nodded. "Yeah, always have." She leaned close and whispered, "See, I still know what you like." It wasn't what she said that bothered me. It was the way she said it, a touch too intentional, like she was laying a breadcrumb trail back to normal. But I didn't want pie. I didn't want small talk. I didn't want to smile through another moment of pretending we were okay. Because in the span of one sentence, Lena had confirmed everything I'd been trying not to admit to myself. That something was wrong, that she was hiding something, and that maybe I'd been too willing to let her hide it. That night, as we got into the car, I buckled my seatbelt and stared straight ahead. Lena hummed softly beside me, like she always did when she was in a good mood. She glanced over and said, "You've been weird tonight." I didn't answer right away. I was too focused on replaying her words from dinner, over and over in my head. She reached out and turned on the radio. "We should do something fun tomorrow. Go hiking? Or brunch with the Baxters." I finally looked at her. "You never liked brunch with the Baxters." She smiled. "Maybe I'm changing." I looked away. "Maybe." She didn't say anything after that, just kept driving. And I sat there, staring out the window at the quiet streets of Boise, knowing in my gut that this night, this dinner, was the moment everything began to fall apart. Not because of what she said, but because I finally heard it. The next morning, I woke up before Lena. She was curled up on her side of the bed, the blanket wrapped neatly around her like she hadn't moved all night. I sat there for a while, just watching her breathe, feeling the weight of everything settle in my chest like wet cement. She looked peaceful, like nothing had changed. But I had. I couldn't get her words from dinner out of my head. That joke about waking up in the wrong hotel with the wrong person. It had carved something open inside me. Something I hadn't wanted to look at for months. Maybe longer. There were things I'd noticed before, odd things, but I had let them go. I told myself I was imagining things, projecting insecurity, or just being unfair. But now it was like I'd been handed a key. And suddenly all those odd things I'd shoved into the corners of my mind were rushing back into the light. Like her phone. Lena used to leave her phone lying around the house. Unlocked, face up, charging on the kitchen counter or abandoned on the coffee table while she folded laundry. It used to light up with texts from her sister or friends, the screen full of emojis and half-finished messages. Now it was always face down, always on silent. And the new passcode? I'd only noticed the change a few weeks ago. I'd asked her casually, pretending I needed to use the calculator. She smiled and said, "Sorry, new work policy. They want us to change them monthly." That didn't feel true. She used to joke about how bad she was at remembering passwords. Suddenly, she was following a strict security protocol. Then there were the nights she stayed late at work. I used to bring her dinner when she had a deadline, show up at her office with takeout and coffee and sit with her while she clicked away on her laptop. She used to love that. Now she told me not to bother. "Just girls," she'd say. "We're doing brainstorming nights. Super informal." Okay, sure. But then she'd come home wearing lipstick that hadn't smudged. Eyeliner still sharp as if it had been reapplied, not worn from hours at a desk. Her hair would be styled in soft waves, not tied up in a bun or messy ponytail like before. And her perfume lingered stronger than usual, like it had just been sprayed. She looked too good for late-night brainstorming. I remember one night clearly. She said she was going to the gym after work, something she'd only recently gotten into, or so she claimed. She came home around 9:30, flushed, smiling, claiming she'd stayed after to stretch and do a little cardio. But I saw her sneakers near the door, spotless, white as new snow, not a single crease or scuff. Back then, I dismissed it. I told myself, it's just a small thing. I wanted to believe her. That was the truth. I wanted to believe her so badly that I erased evidence in my own mind. I rewrote scenes like a bad editor trying to keep the story happy. But after last night, I stopped rewriting. I started watching instead. That Sunday, Lena told me she was meeting her friend Melissa for lunch. Melissa, who used to post every outing on Instagram, but now there were no pictures. I scrolled through her profile that afternoon while Lena was gone. Not a single sh*t of them. Not even a tagged story. I thought about texting Melissa, asking casually, "Hey, how was lunch?" But I didn't. I didn't want to tip Lena off. Not yet. I wasn't ready to confront. I was still collecting. That same afternoon, I walked into our closet to grab my jacket and saw a bracelet I'd never seen before sitting on her dresser tray. Thin gold with a small charm. Not her usual style. I picked it up and turned it in my hand. It looked expensive. When I asked her about it later, she didn't flinch. "Oh, that?" she said, tying her hair back in the mirror. "Leftover from a product shoot. Some of the girls at work brought stuff from this new accessories brand. I think we were allowed to keep whatever didn't get used." I nodded slowly. "Nice of them." She smiled, walked over, and kissed my cheek. "You notice everything," she whispered. "Yeah, I did. I just hadn't let myself admit it before." The thing that kept gnawing at me the most, though, wasn't the phone or the makeup or the bracelet. It was the way she started talking about work again. More specifically, about someone at work. Jason. At first, it was casual. She'd mention his name in passing. "Jason said the conference room coffee tastes like regret." Or, "Jason made the funniest slideshow transition today." Then it was every day. Jason this, Jason that. The whole team was cracking up because Jason pretended to be the CEO during the client call. He's such a clown. I remember raising an eyebrow and asking, "Didn't you say he was kind of quiet?" "Oh," she said quickly. "Yeah, he used to be. But he's warmed up. He's kind of the soul of the team now." Soul of the team. I filed that one away. It was the way she said his name, light, familiar, like it belonged on her tongue. She had never mentioned Jason before this promotion. And now he was the star of every story. I never asked directly. I didn't want to open that box. Not until I was ready to handle what came out. Instead, I started noticing smaller things. How she never left her laptop open anymore. How she took longer in the shower at night. How she set her phone to do not disturb, but still checked it constantly. One night, while she was asleep, I stood in the hallway just watching the soft glow of her screen. It had lit up twice in 2 minutes, then gone dark. No sound, no vibration, just light, messages maybe, or alerts. I never saw them. She had become so careful, but not careful enough. A few days later, I walked past the laundry basket and caught the faintest whiff of cologne. Not mine. Her scarf was bundled loosely on top of a blouse she hadn't worn in months. I picked it up, inhaled. It wasn't my scent. It wasn't hers either. It was unfamiliar, strong, something musky, woodsy, like the cologne samples that came tucked into magazines. That night I asked, "Did you buy a new perfume?" She looked up from her tablet and shook her head. "Nope. Why?" "Smelled something new on your scarf earlier. Just curious." "Oh," she said after a beat. "Maybe Melissa hugged me. She always wears something intense. Or maybe I brushed against someone on the train." She didn't take the train. Not in Boise. She drove. But I didn't say anything. I just nodded and went back to my book. These little moments, the tiny lies, were beginning to stack up like bricks around me. And the worst part? They weren't even big lies. They were throwaway lies. Careless ones. The kind you only tell when you think the person listening won't question them. I started to feel like a stranger in my own house. I'd come home from work and she'd be in the kitchen, smiling, asking about my day, making dinner. But there was a tension underneath it all, like she was waiting for something, or preparing. Sometimes she'd hug me just a little too long, or bring up old memories at random. Our trip to Oregon, our first Christmas in the apartment. That night we got rained on in the middle of nowhere and laughed until we were soaked. She was trying to anchor us, but it didn't feel like love anymore. It felt like damage control, like she knew the dam had cracked, and she was trying to patch it with comfort. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed more. Not for revenge. Not for drama. I needed it for myself. Because deep down I already knew the truth. I just needed it in writing, or in scent, or in someone else's voice. Anything but silence. Sunday morning felt unnaturally quiet. Lena was humming in the kitchen while making coffee, like nothing in the world was wrong. Sunlight filtered through the blinds and painted soft stripes across the hardwood floors. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, it felt staged. I told her I was going to grab the umbrella I'd left in her car the night before. She barely looked up. "Don't forget we're going to my parents' again next weekend," she said lightly. "Mom wants to try a new recipe." "Sure," I answered. My voice sounded normal, calm, even. Inside, it wasn't. Her car was parked in the driveway, still dusty from last week's rain. I opened the passenger door first. Empty. Then I walked around to the driver's side and leaned in. That's when I saw it. In the cup holder, folded once, slightly crumpled, a receipt. It wasn't from anywhere near her office. I unfolded it slowly, like I was handling something fragile. The logo at the top read Riverstone Cafe. I knew that place. It was in a different district, at least 30 minutes from where she worked. Definitely not somewhere you accidentally stopped by during lunch. The timestamp was from Thursday evening. 7:42 p.m. 2 lattes. 1 vanilla. 1 cinnamon. I stood there staring at it, the air suddenly thinner. Lena hated vanilla. She always had. She once sent back a milkshake because it had too much vanilla syrup. She ordered caramel or hazelnut. Always. I told myself it could have been for a coworker. But then I flipped the receipt over. There was a note written in blue ink. "Thank you for yesterday. It was perfect." My stomach dropped. I didn't recognize the handwriting. It wasn't Lena's. I knew her handwriting the way you know your own signature. The way she looped her L's. The way her S curved sharply at the end. This wasn't hers. It was heavier, straighter, confident in a way that made my chest tighten. Yesterday. Thursday. The same night she told me she had late meetings. I didn't feel anger. That surprised me. What I felt was clarity, like a lens snapping into focus. I folded the receipt carefully and slipped it into my pocket. Then I opened the back door and checked the trunk. At first glance, nothing unusual. Gym bag, emergency kit, grocery tote. Then I saw it tucked near the side panel. A gray scarf. Not hers. Lena didn't wear gray scarves. She preferred warm colors. Berg *NDY. Mustard. Cream. This one was charcoal. Thick knit. Masculine. I picked it up. It smelled faintly of her perfume. But underneath that, something else. That same woodsy cologne I'd caught on her clothes before. It wasn't strong. It didn't need to be. It was enough. I stood there for a long time, holding that scarf, feeling something inside me go still. There was no more guessing. No more mental gymnastics. No more maybe. It wasn't a joke at dinner. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't insecurity. It was real. I placed the scarf back exactly where I found it. Closed the trunk. Shut the door gently. When I walked back inside, Lena was leaning against the counter scrolling through her phone. She looked up and smiled. "Find it?" "Yeah," I said. She walked over and kissed me on the cheek. Her lips were warm, familiar. "You've been weird lately," she said softly. "Is everything okay?" There it was again. The performance. The soft concern. The subtle suggestion that I was the unstable one. I looked at her. Really looked at her. The woman I'd built a life with. the woman who used to tell me everything. And I realized something that hurt more than the betrayal itself. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't afraid. She thought she was managing it. She thought she was ahead of me. "I'm fine," I said. And I meant it in a way she didn't understand. I wasn't fine before, when I was guessing, when I was doubting myself. Now I was fine, because now I knew. The rest of the day passed like normal. We watched a show. She made lunch. She leaned into me on the couch, resting her head against my shoulder like she always did. At one point, she reached for my hand. I let her hold it, but I didn't squeeze back. That night, she fell asleep quickly. I lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling. I replayed every moment from the past few months. The late nights, the new bracelet, the girls-only events, the name Jason slipping into conversation more and more often. Jason, logistics, the soul of the team, the man who was always there. I thought about the note on the receipt. "Thank you for yesterday. It was perfect. Perfect." That word felt heavier than anything else. Not fun. Not nice. Perfect. I turned my head and looked at Lena sleeping. She shifted slightly, mumbling something incoherent. For a brief second, I felt the urge to wake her up, to hold up the receipt, to ask her to explain, to watch her scramble. But I didn't, because this wasn't about catching her in a lie anymore. This was about what I was going to do next. And I knew one thing with absolute certainty. There would be no shouting, no broken plates, no dramatic confrontation, just decisions. Quiet ones, careful ones, final ones. For the first time since that dinner, I felt steady. The confirmation hadn't shattered me. It had settled me. Everything I feared was true. And now that I had the truth, I could move forward. Not as a husband trying to fix something, but as a man preparing to leave something. After that Sunday morning, the receipt, the scarf, the quiet confirmation that my suspicions weren't just paranoia. Everything between us changed. Or maybe more accurately, everything stayed the same. Only I had changed. Lena didn't know I knew. That was the difference. She carried on like normal. Brunch suggestions, grocery lists, asking if we should switch to a new streaming service because our algorithm was broken. Little things that made it seem like nothing had shifted. She kissed me good morning like always, asked how I slept, told me her dreams in vivid detail, the kind of dream where she loses her phone or is late to a meeting, as if even her subconscious was still running on office time. I listened. I nodded. I responded when necessary. But something in me had gone cold. Not in an angry way. Not in a cruel way. Just distant. Like I was floating slightly above my own life, watching it happen from a few feet away. She started cooking again. Meals she hadn't made in months. Chicken parm, my favorite. Her grandmother's beef stew recipe that we'd only used once. She even baked, which she never did unless we were hosting. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and vanilla and nostalgia. Should have made me feel something. Didn't. Felt like a cover-up. Like she was trying to bury something underneath the scent of comfort food and clean countertops. A smokescreen of domestic bliss. She was setting the scene. Playing the role of the loving wife. The woman who wanted to reconnect. Who was trying to bring us back together. I wondered how long she'd been planning this version of things. The rebound. The cleanup. The mask. She wore my shirts around the house again like she used to. Played our playlists while she made breakfast. Even the older ones we hadn't listened to since our road trip years ago. She'd say things like, "Remember this song? We danced to it in that motel parking lot in Montana." And smile as if the memory still lived between us. But I couldn't find it anymore. That motel. That song. That trip. All I could see was the receipt in my drawer and the scarf in the trunk. One night, she lit candles before dinner. Dozens of them. Little ones in jars, tea lights in old ceramic holders. One large pillar candle that flickered like it had been waiting to be part of a ritual. The table was set for two like we were on a date. Wine glasses, cloth napkins, a bowl of pasta in the center, steaming, sprinkled with Parmesan. I sat down and watched her across the table. She looked beautiful. Of course she did. She always had. But I wasn't seeing beauty anymore. I was seeing a scene, like watching an actress in a role she didn't quite believe in anymore, trying too hard to convince the audience that the story was still worth telling. We ate. She talked. I listened. She told me about a new hire who seemed a little too eager, and how Jason made a joke about how they needed a bouncer at HR. She laughed as she said it like it was some inside joke we were supposed to share. Jason again. Always Jason. I asked casually, "Do you and Jason work closely now?" She didn't miss a beat. "He's on almost all the same projects. We're paired up a lot. It's fine, he's harmless. Funny, actually. And he's going through a divorce, poor guy." Divorce. The word hung between us like smoke. "Is that why you've been working so late lately?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "All those projects with Jason?" She looked at me just a second too long, then smiled. "Well, yeah. Deadlines are brutal. You know how it gets." I nodded. And that was it. She moved on. Talked about something else. Our next weekend. Maybe visiting the lake. Maybe a drive up north. Just the two of us. We could use the time. I agreed. I agreed to everything, really. It was easier to play along than to disrupt the act. At night, she curled up against me. Her skin warm. Familiar. Her hand resting on my chest like it always had. But I didn't sleep. Not really. I lay there listening to her breathe, thinking about how int asterisk Macy could become routine. How even lies could fall into rhythm if repeated enough times. Sometimes I caught her looking at me when she thought I wasn't watching. Her eyes would linger a little longer, like she was searching for something, signs of suspicion, or maybe just signs of distance. She must have sensed it. Some part of her had to know. But she never asked. She never confessed. She just kept performing. And I realized that I was part of the performance too. Sitting in the front row, clapping politely, pretending the plot still made sense. I started to notice the gap between what she said and what she did. She'd say, "We should start planning a vacation," but she never opened her laptop to look at flights. She'd say, "I love how you always make me feel safe," but she checked her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. She'd say, "Let's get a dog," even showed me pictures of rescues, then never filled out the forms. It was all symbolic, like she was layering future promises over present cracks, hoping they'd stick. I stopped engaging. When she asked about my day, I kept it short. When she told me stories, I listened with polite interest but didn't follow up. She noticed. Of course she did. "You've been quiet lately," she said one night. "Just tired. You sure everything's okay?" "Yeah. You'd tell me if it wasn't. Right?" I looked at her then, really looked, at her face carefully composed. Her lips parted slightly like she was waiting for a response that would make things easier. I nodded. "Of course." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Neither of us believed it. Not really. That was the most surreal part of it all. The way two people could share space, a bed, a dinner table, and still live in separate realities. We were roommates now, actors in a silent play. And every time she wrapped her arms around me or leaned in to kiss my cheek, I felt the weight of what wasn't there. Trust. It was gone. It had vanished so quietly, I hadn't even noticed it leave. Now everything felt like choreography. Rehearsed, polished, hollow. And the scariest part? She thought it was working. She thought if she just did enough, cooked enough, smiled enough, lit enough candles, she could undo what had already been done. But you can't unboil water. You can't rewind betrayal. You can only cover it. And that's what she was doing. Covering it with sweetness, with effort, with carefully timed affection and memories she hoped I still clung to. But I didn't. Not anymore. Because every gesture now had an echo. Every smile came with a shadow. Every kiss reminded me of the handwritten note on that receipt. "Thank you for yesterday. It was perfect." I hadn't had a perfect day with her in months. So who was it perfect with? I knew the answer. She just didn't know I knew. And that, more than anything, made the mask she wore even sadder. Because she wasn't acting to fool me anymore. She was acting to protect herself. From guilt. From consequence. From being seen fully and finally as what she had become. Not a villain. Not a monster, just someone who'd crossed a line and didn't know how to come back. So she pretended it hadn't happened. And I let her. For now. I didn't say a word that night. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't throw plates, I didn't ask questions. I went to bed in the guest room, letting her think everything was fine. She didn't question my absence. She never did. The next morning I woke early, before her as always. The house was quiet. The sunlight streamed in through the blinds, painting the living room with streaks of gold. I could hear her humming softly in the kitchen, like everything was ordinary. Everything looked ordinary. But I wasn't ordinary anymore. I had made my decision. I didn't want confrontation, not yet. I wanted preparation. I wanted a plan that left no room for her games, no chance to manipulate me anymore. I started small, practical things, quiet things. I opened a separate bank account, moved a few $1,000s into it, enough to give me independence if I needed to leave immediately. I shifted some investments, downloaded important documents to cloud storage. I checked passwords, email backups, insurance policies, every practical measure I could think of to safeguard my life. I wasn't panicking. I wasn't angry. I was methodical, careful, focused. Then I began collecting my personal belongings. Things that mattered. Not just material items, but pieces of my life I didn't want left behind. My grandfather's watch. Letters Lena had written me when we first moved in together. Photographs of trips and anniversaries. A small box of mementos from our early years. Tickets to movies, museum passes, postcards. I carefully wrapped each one and hid them in a storage box I stashed in the garage. In a corner she never went. Every time I added an item, I felt a strange mixture of sorrow and relief. Sorrow for the memories themselves, for the life we had built. Relief because I was reclaiming them, protecting the parts of me she could not touch, no matter how perfectly she tried to act normal. I stopped planning our weekends together. No more trips to the lake. No more long drives. No more let's just spend time evenings. Those days were over. I had stopped reacting to her stories, even when she tried to tempt me with little pleasures. Especially when she mentioned him, Jason. Every casual mention of him now felt like a test. Oh, Jason helped me move the files today. Such a lifesaver. Or, Jason stayed late to fix the system. Can you believe it? Each time, I felt a small ache in my chest, like someone had tapped a nerve I didn't know was still exposed. But I didn't react. I simply nodded, agreed, smiled lightly, as if I had no thoughts at all. I observed her quietly, noting everything. She started leaving her phone on the counter, face down, sometimes on silent. Sometimes she left it charging in the living room, unattended, like she was confident I wouldn't notice. I did notice. Every movement, every choice. She tried to fill the silence with conversation, jokes, affection. She cooked my favorite meals, suggested movies we had enjoyed before, played our old playlists while lighting candles. She leaned into comfort. She leaned into familiarity. I recognized it for what it was. Performance. Everything was staged. Every act measured, precise, calculated. Nothing was genuine anymore. Even her smiles. Even her hugs. They were all designed to erase my suspicion, to rewrite our reality into something that looked perfect from the outside. But I wasn't fooled. I had already seen the cracks, already felt the emptiness beneath her gestures. It wasn't love. It was control. She was trying to reassure herself that she could still maintain appearances, that I could still be fooled. But I had stopped being an audience. I spent hours sitting alone in our home, quietly observing, taking note of her behaviors. I watched her move through the rooms like a practiced actor, every step measured, every glance directed, every laugh perfectly timed. And with every gesture, I felt a growing clarity. I began making lists, not of accusations, not of grievances, practical lists, tasks, things I would need to do once the time came. Legal matters, property, banking, logistics, every detail accounted for. I mapped out scenarios in my head. A weekend when I could remove my things. A night she wouldn't notice my absence. A morning when I could leave without confrontation. every possibility accounted for, every potential interruption mitigated. I became invisible, quiet, almost a shadow in my own home. I stopped interrupting her routines. I didn't ask questions. I didn't demand attention. I simply existed, watching, waiting, preparing. Even when she tried harder. She started making conversation at night, lingering with small talk, offering apologies for minor things. Late dishes, a forgotten note, a messy counter. She tried to regain normalcy, to reassure me with trivial gestures that everything was as it should be. I didn't engage. I ate in silence when she served dinner, even when she plated the food just the way I liked it. Precisely seasoned, perfectly arranged. I didn't comment. I didn't praise. I just ate. I watched her reaction, noted the subtle adjustments she made in response to my lack of engagement. Subtle tilts of the head, small shifts in her posture, faint hesitations in her voice. Every moment a confirmation of what I already knew. She was aware of my distance. She understood that her performance was failing. I stopped leaving the bed at night once she was asleep. I didn't want her to see me moving around. I didn't want to give her any clue about my intentions. Instead, I lay there awake planning, not out of vengeance, not out of malice, out of necessity. I didn't need arguments. I didn't need explanations. I needed a methodical, clean exit, a separation that allowed me to protect my life, my memories, and my peace of mind. Every action she took, cooking, smiling, hugging, reminded me why I had to remain calm, why I had to be deliberate. Emotional reactions would ruin everything I had carefully arranged. She could try to manipulate me, charm me, even guilt me. I had to resist all of it. I began cataloging small pieces of evidence quietly. Receipts, notes, unusual items left behind. Not for confrontation, not for proof to show anyone else, but for myself. So that when the time came, there could be no doubt. No ambiguity. I started preparing emotionally, too. Letting go of the hope that we could return to what we once had. Letting go of the trust that had been eroded over months, then years. Letting go of the narrative I had once believed, the one where love could fix everything. I stopped looking at her the way I used to, not out of hatred, not out of anger, but out of clarity. The affection, the connection, the int** Macy, all of it had been a facade for too long, and I had to accept it. I focused on myself instead. Simple things. Exercise, old hobbies I had abandoned. Reconnecting with friends. Building the foundation for the life I would lead when the quiet exit came. I told no one. Not Lena. Not friends. Not family. It was a personal operation. Meticulous, silent, deliberate. I became someone she couldn't influence. Someone untouchable. My inner life became private. My thoughts sharpened. I learned to watch without being observed, to prepare without revealing, to plan without panic. Every day she performed. Every day I collected, cataloged, planned. Every day, the reality became clearer. Our marriage was no longer a partnership. It was a staged performance, and I was preparing to leave the theater entirely. Quiet preparation became my ritual, a shield, a strategy. A way to reclaim control without chaos. And all the while, she continued, smiling, cooking, suggesting weekend trips, playing old songs, lighting candles, trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. I let her try, because nothing she did could change the truth. The time for confrontation would come. But until then, silence, observation, and preparation were my allies. In the last days, Lena tried harder than ever. She baked cinnamon cookies, lit candles, showed me a new suitcase for us, and suggested a California trip to reset things. Every gesture was polished, rehearsed, desperate. She leaned on shared memories, old playlists, dinners, even the walks we loved. But I could see through it. Her smiles were calculated, her touches measured. Every night felt like theater. A performance meant to erase the evidence, to revive the past. I stayed quiet, watched, and prepared. Every conversation, every laugh, every reminder of us became a marker of emptiness. I was ready. Monday morning, I left the divorce papers on the kitchen table next to her favorite mug with a note. I can't continue participating in this. You know everything. I went to work. That evening, she sat silently, papers and signed. She didn't cry. Time seemed frozen. A month later, at a corporate event, I saw her with Jason. She announced it loudly. No one reacted. I turned and left, refusing to witness her performance. Later, her messages piled up. I read them all. Silence became my only answer. Carried weight, closure, and truth, the final statement I needed.